Okay, figure drawing. Not to be confused with gesture drawing. Figure drawing is going to be the step up from gesture drawing. And so in gesture drawing, we're mainly looking at capturing the essence of a pose within a short period of time. And we're looking at taking several simple lines to really capture the essence of the movement of the fluidity of a pose. So today what we're going to be focusing on is figure drawing. Now, figure drawing is going to be composed of 7 main steps that we're keeping in mind, key parts to the figure drawing, which is what we take into account whenever we go about approaching a pose when we're doing a figure drawing session. Now, something I do want to address before we move on, a lot of videos that you'll see about this are going to be done with digital art, just as this video for the introduction, what I'm showing you right now. I want to make one thing clear, which is very important when we're talking about digital art. Digital art is just a tool, okay? It is no different from drawing with pencil, with charcoal, with marker, Sharpie, colored pencil, watercolor. It's all the same when we're looking at figure drawing, okay? Because what's important is knowing the process behind figure drawing rather than the tool in which we're using. Really, you should be able to move from any sort of medium as long as you use the same process in mind. So this introduction is going to be about talking mainly on the 7 key parts to figure drawing, okay? And then we're going to look into several demonstrations which are going to be with and without digital art to just talk about the difference between the two and why it's really so similar, and that digital art is mainly only used for videos to show clarity within the drawing process, if that makes any sense. So let's go ahead and talk about the 7 main parts to a figure drawing that we should keep in mind. First one, rhythm. When we're looking at the figure, when we're drawing the figure, we're mainly focused on rhythm. And so rhythm is going to be how we guide our eye from one point to the next point and how we move from one line to the next within the body. And I'm going to show you some examples of how rhythm can be used. We're going to look at Glenville Pooh to show how we use rhythm properly. Rhythm is also associated with the same thing, I would say generally, as flow. The flow, although in some cases you could be talking about the flow of the body, which is generally as a whole instead of a part, but they're generally the same thing. This list is in no particular order. I just want to make sure that I get through all 7. Shapes. Whenever we're looking at a figure, right, the model, even in the best drawings where they're not shown, we're always thinking about shapes within our mind. We're trying to deconstruct the figure. And we're trying to grab the parts behind the figure, right? So talking whether it's in an anatomical sense or rather a geometrical sense, we're trying to deconstruct and simplify what we're seeing to work with shapes. And so shapes can be very helpful with perspective. Okay, because as I'll talk about even more in depth later on, we're really not focused on copying the model. We're focused on the liveliness of our own drawing, right? So we never copy the model. So what we're really trying to look at is making a story, showing a story, we're trying to capture the essence of this pose, this story, which is being told through the body language, the facial expression, and the structure of the figure to send a message to the audience so that they can understand what it is that our character is thinking about. Now, first off, we're going from the model and then we're moving into a character. So why is this so important? Well, we're talking about figure drawing for animation. And in animation, we're always focused on characters. We're focused on storytelling. And so what we're trying to do is we're going to eventually take our figure drawing to the next level, which is we want to take that model, we want to design our own characters, build up a sort of a database in our mind, knowledge of after doing figure drawing for a decent amount of time, after building up our data bank, we're able to construct figures from the imagination. We're able to construct figures based off of what we need for our story. Within that one period of time, we're trying to capture the model within a period of time. Gesture. Just because we aren't doing gesture drawings does not mean we don't take that into account. Gesture is always there. We're focused on that, the liveliness and the fluidity of the figure, trying to capture that movement within them. 5, pushing the pose, very essential to animation, pushing the pose. Just because the drawing that you have done is correct does not mean that it's going to properly convey the message that you want to send to your audience. So really, to make sure for the sake of clarity, we're going to take that drawing, original drawing, I'm going to show you some examples, and then we're going to push that even more so to make it more clear so that the audience really gets what we're trying to send them, and so that we make sure that we're trying to hit that mark of 100% of the time having the audience properly understanding what it is that we want our character doing. We're going to talk about the line of action. This terminology gets thrown around a lot. It really is essential. I do find it to be very helpful. I think most people do find it to be helpful. It really works for a foundation, for sort of a guide for building the foundation of our drawing, working with the general motion of the figure in one simplified line to guide us. And then we're going to talk about form of the figure. So these are the 7 main things to always keep in mind whenever you're going about the process of figure drawing. And there's different approaches, so just because you have the same process of what it is that should be kept in mind doesn't mean you have the same approach in general to how it works. So I'm going to talk about different approaches that we can see. There are 2 main approaches that we can work with here. One which is more Western, one which is more Eastern. So let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, so everyone likes to go back to the masters. So on the left I have Michelangelo, and on the right I have Raphael. So beautiful drawings, absolutely incredible draftsmanship, as you can immediately tell. But what the point is that when we're looking at this sort of Western take, we're more focused on the rhythm, the flow, gesture, and form of the figure, for the rhythm, okay? Less on the shape. So obviously for these figures that we're talking about, these were some of the masters. They had a tremendous foundation when it comes to understanding of the anatomy, right? So clarity, a great understanding of what it is as far as the figure. How does it work? What is its form? Anatomical correctness. And so we're not trying to be 100% realistic. We're just trying to capture the liveliness, right? So let's look at it here. Let's talk about rhythm. Let's go through rhythm first, since I talked about that. So rhythm. So talking about, look how it moves. The body moves from this one shape to the next, down through the calf. So look at this form. So when we're looking at the thigh right here, we're moving from the upper leg down to the bottom leg right here. You can see this sort of fluid motion, right? You can see that's how rhythm works when we're looking within the body. And so obviously it's a simplified sort of introduction to what rhythm really is, but it's about this movement which captures the fluidity of the drawing, of moving from this sort of S curve, as we usually call it, moving from one side down to the S and then back over to the other side, just like that. So that's going to be your rhythm, and that's how it works, which is going to be the same thing with flow. So shapes, as I said, this sort of approach, when you see within the drawings of Michelangelo and Raphael and Da Vinci, it's all about this sort of rhythm and flow within the gesture, less about shapes. We're going to talk about the Russian approach, which is going to be slightly different. The Russian approach is more focused on shapes. Still keeps all the 7 main components in mind, but it's a different approach. And so, like I said, you can end up with phenomenal end pieces, the final product, while still having a different approach. So let's look at gesture, obviously, as we're looking within here. Okay, so we're talking about the movement of the head. We're talking about really curving of the back, the spine here of the torso, moving down like that. Okay, and then the bottom half, which is going to be moving outwards. So not as much, obviously, but we are still dealing with, as we see in the animation, the squash and stretch. Really feeling the stretch right through here. This doesn't go away. We always keep this in mind. Really seeing the stretch right here and the squash of the main 2 parts, which are going to be separated right here. Okay, talking about contrapposto, we're seeing that is the main movement segmentation of the figure, as we're talking about looking at these main 2 parts. So contrapposto is going to be looking at 1, which is going to be across the shoulders, and 2, which is the hips at this region right here. And so we're looking at this general shape, and we can usually find that what happens within the human figure is we'll end up putting our weight on one part of the body to balance ourselves, which then offsets the other part of the body. And so that's how we can go about creating a clear pose to show where the weight is really resting, because you can feel the weight upon the foot right here as opposed to the leg, which is coming out right there. Okay, pushing the pose, obviously these are going to be more about life studies, drawings, but they are pushed. You can even tell subtly that the drawings that we have right here are going to be slightly different, probably what they were seeing within the model. To create that fluid motion and the liveliness of it, we're pushing these main components. It's all about grabbing these other parts together and pushing them even more so that allows us to do this. And so the line of action, we're seeing this general shape. We're seeing this general, let's grab a different color. Let's grab a red here. We're seeing this movement, right? This movement. It's going to be going through and then over. So that's what we're generally seeing here. This is a lot more simplified when we're looking at the figure, going straight up right through here. So on this one, probably more of around right there. So that's going to be your line of action, which is moving all the way down through the figure and then to the bottom. Okay, so same thing that we can find here can also be found in Michelangelo's drawing here on the left. So we can go ahead and grab the black marker here and talk about how this works. So talking about contrapposto, we still have that being put across very subtly, but it's going to be more of a downward movement on the bottom there. Still seeing great anatomy as we're looking through here, proper form. Talking about shapes, when we look at the shoulder, we can still see this sort of, as we talked about, the shapes are definitely still there. You can still draw those tubes. We love drawing tubes when we're looking at arms and legs, very simplified process. We can go ahead and look here, although he is still using perspective, obviously. So we can see as it's moving up, for that, moving in, tubes, which is going down, and still working as it gets even smaller over here. Okay, so we're still looking at these lines, the form of the nose, which is right there, the mouth, still looking at proper anatomical structure within the head, this general shape of the head that we're looking at, and the tubes, which is going to be for the neck. Okay, so we still have this anatomical understanding of accuracy. So this is going to be mainly about the Western. We're talking about look at the motion within here of the body, really going to be exaggerated when we're looking at the anatomical features, really seeing this movement. And as we talk about the Russian approach, as we said, it's slightly different. It's going to be more about the shapes. So if I were to take this in the Russian approach, it's probably going to look more along the lines of like so. So let's grab a new layer, and I will show you how exactly that would look. So if we're looking at the Russian approach right here, what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I probably will start off with the line of action. just to be able to find that general movement of the body. But I'm going to start off with the head. Okay, I'm going to start off with the head. I'm going to move down. I'm going to look, find the chin, general form of the figure, find the neck here. And then what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to go ahead and find the main lines. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to see this movement. And so I have the hips moving down. Okay. Sort of what we're doing is it's like a box structure. That's what we're doing, is we're working in boxes. And so it focuses, Russian approach focuses more on the actual shape of what exactly it is that we're doing within the figure here. Okay. And so it's kind of going, it's going back, right? You could even say, for the sake of the argument, if you wanted to have it more clear, you could say, well, maybe what we do is have the chest coming out for the adjustment, with it going back. And so the Russian approach is going to be more about the actual shapes within itself. We would go down and find the tubes of the legs. Same thing here, finding that joint adjustment and moving down, trying to find the main shapes. And that's what it would be completely about, is finding the shapes within the figure and moving down and through the body. And so it would be all about making sure that the shapes actually work within that. So that's going to be more of that approach. Now, as you can see, if we go through shapes, we can obviously build off of that. And it's more about finding, what we can do is we can find the anatomical accuracy, the proportional accuracy, much more easily to sort of grid out where our figure is, where everything is lying. But as you can see, you then have to build off of that. You really, really have to then push that even more, so when you're making sure that you're going over, that you don't have a rigid, stiff figure, okay? So that's going to be the other approach. So then what comes next after these main components? Well, obviously then we look into shadows, moving within shapes, and defining regions. And so I know what usually happens a lot is people get caught up within the details. They're not focused as much on the actual figure itself. It's immediately, let's draw the head, and then let's find the regions of where there's shadow, and let's start separating those areas. And so, no, what we want to do is we want to create the whole figure first. We want to generate the whole figure, and then after everything has been put in, then we move into the detail. Then we start to slowly build upon layers and build our figure up from the bottom. Okay, so let's look at some other drawings. So Glenville Pooh is one of my favorite artists. I should talk about, real quickly, just to mention, the Michelangelo drawing that I had right here was from New Masters Academy, and you can go ahead and go look up New Masters Academy. Highly recommend that you do so. Great learning center, great resource for improving your artistic skills. And then on the right here's going to be the Raphael from the British Museum. So let's look at Da Vinci. Sorry, not Da Vinci. Let's look at Vilppu. Glenville Pooh is what you would call one of the last Renaissance artists, really. His drawing and style is heavily influenced by and inspired by some of the great artists of the Renaissance era. And so when you're looking at his drawings, you would see that it's almost exactly what we'd be expecting from these other drawings, right? You almost see no difference. And so he's really learned how to take this approach into account and how to work with the figure using these main steps and to find the fluidity, the rhythm within the figure, the liveliness that is brought to it. So all of this information can be taken within animation. And I would highly recommend looking at Glenville Pooh, Charles Hugh, Bill Perkins, Aaron Blaze, all of these artists which have worked within animation that are creating artwork within. When they're looking at their figure drawing, they would clearly explain that what they're doing is they're taking the figure drawing that you're seeing, and they're turning into a story. They're making something out of it. They're moving beyond what they're just seeing, and they're taking that story to make it the centerpiece of the actual final product of the drawing. And so they're trying to tell a story within here, just as you see within Glenville Pooh right here. I mean, you're really feeling the push of these poses right here. You're really feeling the curve in this sense, almost in that way, and you're really feeling it within the figure. And that's really the whole main point when you're going about this, is it's about the exaggeration. That's what we want in animation. We want to exaggerate the figure even more so. Squash and stretch that you see right here. Right here, here's the stretch, here's the squash. The bean shape that we're looking at is still being put in use, even so right here, right? Even so, all the way through, we're still using this general shape of, if we look right here for what we're seeing, is really, as we're pushing up, we're moving in this stretched form, and then back down, and then over, right? So it's really, it's this pinch, this part right here that we're focused on. Really right here, it's this bean shape which is going out. And so that's really, when we look at that, we're saying, hey, it's almost like a sack of potatoes. Well, yes, it is. That's why we do that animation exercise. That's why we look at that sort of shape. So really, we're still using that even right here. And so that's why I'd highly recommend going to New Masters Academy and checking out what it is they have to offer. Excellent video lessons, which are all focused on these sorts of ideas right here, taking these into use, expanding upon these, how we build that process, and how we make sure that we master that process. And every single time that we make sure that we keep that process within our head consistently, one time after another, every single time that we build a figure that we draw, that we're keeping this in mind, using the same approach every single time, whether it be the Russian approach, whether that be more of the Western approach, that we're still keeping that into account. So let's look at the larger figure, which is right here. Obviously, you can see the head, which is really feeling this movement all the way through the figure for the line of action that is finishing off right there. You're seeing this hunch of the shoulders right here, bending down right here, and still the figure which is moving through. Really feeling this squash right there. The weight, okay, the weight right there that we're feeling. And then seeing right here, the legs, which you can obviously see. And so you're going to have perspective still being put in, and we're still moving the character, even if they are on a surface right here, like this couch that you have, we're still seeing the interactions that we'd expect from the 7 main key processes. And so really, when we're looking at animation, this is all what it's about. It's just about going through this process over and over and over again and keeping it in mind. And so it'll really help when you're doing your figure drawing sessions, if you'll just keep this in mind as you go along throughout this series, what we're talking about, so you can really build your characters. That's it for this introduction, and in the next video, we'll be going further into depth on how Glenville Pooh goes about his drawings.